Welcome to Sales TV, our weekly stroll through everything sales. Today we're much more highbrow than normal. We're lucky enough to have Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich with us, and he's going to chat to us about why. Andy, how lovely to see you.
Go on, Tim. Go on, Tim. I'm dying to say something.
We were highbrow for a moment, weren't we? And then all of a sudden,
in the immortal words of George Bush, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here.
Yes, and have you ever wondered why, when you're undergoing some sort of transformation in your business, why 9 times out of 10 it doesn't work? Why 9 times out of 10, where you as a leader are trying to enforce change on an organization, there are your 7 horsemen of the apocalypse that change with you, but then everybody else are laggards or don't want to change or seem to put the brakes on or put up barriers. Well, there's a very good reason for that. So today we're going to hear some of the ways that you can start to sort out these problems from Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich. But first of all, let's have some intros. Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Hughes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite and the author of the book Social Selling Techniques to Influence Buyers and Changemakers.
Alex.
Good morning, all. Alex Abbott, founder of Sapiro, proud partner of, or I should say, exultant partner of DLA Ignite, fellow of the Institute of Sales Professionals, and new fan of Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich and his book, Transforming Sales Management.
Andy.
Just general good-looking bloke. To hear Dr. Grant. I've arrived thinking he should have a white cat because he's like Dr. Grant sounds like a Bond villain, and hopefully we're going to get a little insight into what the next Bond film's going to be.
Myself, Adam Gray, co-founder of DLA Ignite with Tim, my business partner, and saving the best till last, like a fine wine. Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich, please introduce yourself.
Honestly, I don't know who any of you are. I was just trolling LinkedIn this morning and on this show, so it's nice to see you. No, but in all candor, I'm Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich. Andy and I go way back, so it's good to see you again this morning. And I'm excited to be here to share all things sales and sales transformation with you all. It's an honor.
Fantastic. So my in my intro, I said one of the things that we will all have come up against in our careers is that a transformation or a change is forced upon us in our working lives, and either it aligns with our view of the world, in which case we're for it, or it doesn't, in which case we are genuinely scared in some instances. And that fear of the change may manifest itself as us being scared and not enjoying what it is we're doing, or it might manifest itself in terms of us trying to put up barriers to stop that change from happening because we feel threatened by it. Now, this has always been a problem because I think in organizations, change has been a strategic initiative which has been taken on by the leadership team, and they've said, right, we're all marching in this direction, and then off we march, except we don't all march off. Oh, hello, Andy. Nice to see you. We don't all march off. So what can we do about this? What's the secret? What's in the box that you can open and show us that might help us overcome these challenges, both as organizations and as individuals?
I guess that question is pointed to me. Is that right?
Well, no one cares what anyone else has to say.
Yes, we do.
We're on a free ride, yeah. It's all about you today, baby.
Well, the first thing, if you want to open a box, open this box, Transforming Sales Management. So it's my new book. It is Leading Sales Teams Through Change. So hopefully you can get that book. Exactly. I know some friends who have that book as well, too. So, it's really interesting. Actually, I started my journey years ago with Andy and actually bringing Andy into Royal Caribbean International into helping us and looking at sales and how do we build a sales academy that's based on sales science and sales psychology. you remember that, Andy? Taking a look at what we had, which was literally nothing. And so from there, the direction was I needed to go back to school, back to university. And Andy and the team knew that there was a master's program in sales and leading sales transformation. And in my 40s, I was scared to death. I was terrified. I thought, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to do this? Am I worthy? Can I even do this? I had such doubt every step of the way, to the point when I met Dr. Philip Squire, who's in charge of the academy and the master's programs. I flat out told him, I can't do this. I'm not going to be successful. My leadership is saying that I needed to do this in order to build a sales academy for our company. And he looked at me and he said, yes, you can. You absolutely can do this. And I said, but I didn't have university background. I went into the military. And he said, actually, you might even do better because you don't have the bias from other universities and you're more open to following leadership and direction. So why don't you give it a try? And in doing so, in the master's program, there's a segment on leading change. And that change process, we learned about all of the different organizational change models that are out there and how they are meant for leaders to use on the organization. And the key word was on the organization and on people. And instantly I started to reject that. And I thought, this doesn't really make sense to me. How am I supposed to use all of these models on my team members? Where's the model for them? What about the individual? Because as an individual, we can reject change, and often we do. And you were just saying it, Adam. The research actually shows that only 30% of organizational change management actually is successful. That goes back to John Cotter's work. And, the rest of it is in somewhere where it happened, but it wasn't fruitful. It wasn't to the desires of the organization, to more outright failure. So why is that? And in raising my hand to my professors, I said, listen, if you look at all of these organizational change models, they have one thing in common. And they said, well, what's that? We started into a dialogue. And I said, they're all prescriptive. And they say that at the end of it, the change is magically going to happen. And the people are going to, as if somehow, all sing a wonderful song and say that it's going to be wonderful. And that's just not true. It's not true at all. I said, as a human being, can you accept change? Yes, I can. Great. As a human being, can you reject change? And that's where they started to get a little nervous. Yeah, can. I said, okay, what about indecision? Have you ever been stuck and just go, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I don't know if this is going to be right for me. We all feel that way. And sometimes we don't verbalize it. And that's where it gets really dangerous within an organization. Because as leaders, we lead transactionally. And we say, this is what you should do. This is how you're going to do it. And you'll follow my lead. And the key word was follow. And that's not where we live today. We do not live in that environment. We do not live in that era. As Dr. Julian Birkinshaw says, we are in an democracy where people have a co-equal advantage between the buyer and the seller. And we're buying based off of emotional feelings and emotional actions. And that's true because I'm sitting there right now and I've got 2 cell phones, one for work, one for personal. We take pictures of our food. We take pictures of everything. We base our decisions off of, do people like me, or do I like it, or how do I feel about something? So it's true. The era is true. And you can get stuck in the middle of indecision. Mm-hmm. So I said to my supervisors, well, then these models don't work. Mm-hmm. If people can accept change and reject change, these models do not include that. And the challenge from my professors was, well, then perhaps you need to make a model that does. And so that's what we've done. We've built a model that is bespoke for the individual. It's the first time in the world that there is a model for individual change. Because I've met each and every one of you, and I've asked you this question before, and I'll ask it to the audience. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever been taught how to manage personal change for yourself? Exactly. And in every conversation, every speech, whether it's my TED Talk or whatever it is, everybody else says the exact same thing. No, we've never been taught. Now, why is that? The one thing that every one of us on the planet will go through each and every day, shouldn't we learn how to manage that for ourselves? And so that's where this new model comes into play, and it teaches you how to manage that for yourselves. And this is critical for leadership to understand, because if you understand how people think and act, and you can learn how to coach them through it, and where it matches directly to their values and their identity, then you've got a greater chance for success. Yeah, and you've got a greater opportunity.
Yeah. So I think personal change, it goes in that bucket with a bunch of other things like managing finances that should be in the school curriculum, the national curriculum in schools. But just coming back a few steps to what you were saying about the success of transformation, or the success rate, 30% are successful, I think you said.
Right. That goes back to, it's interesting because there's a myth out there that says 70% of all change management fails. And a friend of mine is Dr. David Wilkinson. He's the chief editor of the Oxford Review at Oxford. His former career was a police chief, an inspector. And so that never sat well with him. And so he's went police inspector all the way through to academia. And he did a thorough investigation and traced it all the way back to John Cotter. And what John Cotter actually said was that 30% of organizational change is successful. That's it. He said the rest is somewhere in between of it didn't happen the way the organization would want to outright failure. And as time goes by, somebody, don't know who, you cannot pinpoint it. You absolutely cannot pinpoint in the research who actually says that, but it's quoted by McKinsey Studies, Harvard Business Review, so many corporations and entities that somebody's done the raw math and said, well, if 30% is successful, then 70% must be failure. And that's not true. It's absolutely not true.
Yeah. So I think about where we are in sales today, and a lot of companies are thinking about transforming the way they sell. I often speak with senior leaders about being more buyer-centric. Well, that's often a buzzword, but how do you actually change your entire model to be more buyer-centric across the organization? That sounds like quite a big transformation that's required. Does that stat of 30% apply to sales as well? Is it any transformation?
I would say in my research, it does apply across the board. And here's the reason why. There are many buzzwords out there: sales improvement, sales enablement, sales transformation. Transformation is hitting everywhere. You're seeing digital transformation, etc. But then I go back to Dr. Philip Squire's research. What are we trying to do here? Is it change, and it's change management, or is it transformation? And there is a difference. And the key difference is, if you're applying change management into an organization on people, whether it be salespeople, operations, accounting, HR, whoever, if you're applying change to them, change allows you to go backwards. You can change a habit today, but if you don't have an enabling support mechanism to continue it forward, it can fall back the way it goes. And Dr. Squire uses a lovely analogy of a caterpillar transitioning and transforming into a butterfly. He's not trying to become a better caterpillar. He's changed into something that he cannot go back to. That's the definition for transformation. We don't do that in sales transformation today, unless you start to apply a model like this, like Scared So What. You've got to include the individual in the change process. So again, if you look at total quality change management today, it is transactional, and it follows transactional leadership. I'm going to follow a model. I'm going to tell everybody what we're going to do. We're going to go through a process, and at the end of it, I've promised the business that it'll be done, and we'll be XYZ more successful. And Andy, you're shaking your head because we see this everywhere, every day. When in true reality is, if you don't bring the individuals on board, you're not changing anything. You might only get 30%, because that's statistically where you can go. But if you want it to work, you've got to hit to individuals, which is where Scared So What comes into play. Once you've done that, everybody's on board, then you apply the organizational change model, because you've got the team on board. Everybody's singing the same song.
We discussed this briefly yesterday when we spoke, that part of the challenge is that many of us, old people like us, are still operating, even if we're not operating, we're still envisaging change in the way that change has happened to us in our corporate lives, which is the person at the top has instructed, this is where we're going. And the concept of not being part of that change has not been something that we have ever entertained. I mean, we haven't been part of the change sometimes because we've not bought into it and we've not wanted to change. But the idea of verbalizing that and putting our hand up and saying, no, I don't accept this change, is completely alien to us. And I think that the overwhelming majority of organizations are managed in exactly that fashion, aren't they? I'm in charge. I'm the captain of this ship. I will chart a course and you guys will come with me on that particular journey. And that's about the size of it. There is no debate. There is no checking in with me to be sure that I'm comfortable with making that transition. There is no coaching me through that transitional process. So like you said, Alex, in schools, this is one of the things that should be taught. I'm amazed that in schools, the first thing that you're not taught is how to learn. They cram you full of knowledge, or they try to cram you full of knowledge. The idea of this is how you need to learn, this is how you need to adopt something is alien because it's never taught. And that's obviously reflected in the fact that only 30% of transformations work, because actually it's not playing to how people operate. So Grant, talk us through what is the process of me changing? How do I need to go through that learning?
Yeah. So the model that we put into research was to embrace people's fears. And if you can think about a change process that happens to you, it's not that you're afraid of it, it's that your body is telling you something is wrong. So it doesn't matter if it's a positive change, like you just got a promotion, or you got a new job, or you're getting married, or you got a new account, a big new account, which means a lot of responsibility. Those can all be positive change experiences. But what happens to you? Your mind starts to race. You start to breathe faster. Your heart starts to beat a little faster. Maybe you get goosebumps or you break out in a sweat with nervousness and anxiety. Why is that? Because it's a positive change. It's supposed to feel good. Well, your body and your mind is telling you, hey, this is a change and I need to get my mind around it. I can't compute it at the moment. So don't make assumptions. That is the danger zone. And that's typically often what we do, whether it's a positive change or a negative change. So what the model is about is embracing change, right? And instead of making an assumption about it or a panic reaction, like for example, think back to yourselves whenever you've had a change situation happen in your life. Alex, when you're younger and you had a change that maybe you're starting school, something new that's panicking you. You go to mom, dad, brother, sister, whoever it is, and you go to them and say, I don't know what to do. What do they say to you?
My mum was a transactional leader.
Yeah. There you go. Did she just say, just get on with it?
Get on with it, Alex.
Yeah, exactly. And that's common because our parents, our supervisors, our teachers, our professors, they haven't learned how to manage personal change for themselves. So the best they can offer you is a platitude that says, hey, you'll be fine. But it doesn't make you feel good. And your mind and your body is saying that. So you go away stuck in assumptions of what you can do. So the model is scared, so what? Embrace the situation, embrace the change, and start to break it down so you can have less anxiety, less stress, less worry and fear about it, and say, right, am I surprised about the change? Am I conflicted about the change, or do I champion the change, positive energy or negative energy? Or even in between, am I feeling neutral about it? What actions could I take is the A. So action in sales is the heart of everything we do. If you generate an action, information points come in. The same thing happens within dealing with personal change. If you ask yourself what actions I can take, do I do research? Do I call Andy as a friend? Do I ask Tim's advice? What do I do? By getting information, you're now starting to critically reflect on a change process and you're putting assumption away. Yeah.
So
you can certainly call me, but I'm not probably going to answer because
exactly.
So I love that. And I think if it's driven by the individual, they're making the choice based on, they're making the choice of which actions to take based on their feelings, their emotion. Fantastic. But is there not a risk that leaders will still try to manipulate the outcome rather than coach of their?
Yeah, absolutely. Every day. It's going to be difficult to change, a leader's beliefs and traits, right? Transactional leaders by nature are transactional leaders, but they're not followed. You're not, if you lead only as a transactional leadership, I'm sorry, your role will be short-lived. And that's evidenced time and time and time again, as we've all seen. How many transactional leaders would lead in a style to say, you must be feared, you must do what I say, you must do what I do, and tell you. And how long does that last? You just lose people left and right. But if you function as a transformational leader, then you're not afraid of opinions, thoughts, contribution, employee development. You're not afraid of coaching. You actually use coaching as your main methodology to develop others and to invite ideation into the conversation. So you're absolutely right. If you're a transactional leader and that's the way you live and breathe, you're going to be spot out really quickly once the individual learns how to manage change for themselves. So it is a risk. And it's a risk for leaders.
Yeah, we need to teach the leaders within these organizations about how to help their people manage the personal change they're going through.
Absolutely.
No, I think you could go one step back. We've talked about this. This comes down to addictive leadership versus vulnerable and authentic leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at what Grant and I have done, and some other people like Grant, like Ben Dorks, John Nicholson, some of the people in the Leadership Fellow Network at the ISP who look like Grant, these are authentic, vulnerable leaders who've decided to challenge themselves, and consequently people will follow that. But there is a huge amount of addictive leaders in sales who are going, this worked for me when I was 25. This worked for me as I came through the ranks. I use the word ranks loosely.
Yeah.
It therefore must work today. And I think somebody's comment about, and Grant said this, it's someone standing up going, here's a business problem that the business has decided is a problem. The business has decided where we need to go. We don't care really where we are, and you're all going to follow. Thank you. And then we'll decide whether it's successful or not. And it's like really fascinating. And we talked about it last week. There's 5 Ps that I look at in my role at Cranfield and my role in the ISP, which is product. Most people have got a similar product these days. Pricing, anyone can copy your pricing. Anyone can use a sales platform. Most people have got access to the similar ones, and most people use similar processes. The difference is your people. And what I love about the book is actually challenge this with the leader and the CEO of OT Group. And we said, what makes your people different? What makes Royal Caribbean's people different from Virgin Cruises? And it was a stunned silence, and it was then personal brand. And it was like, that's the piece, isn't it? What I really love about your research is you're dealing with that piece about how people develop and move themselves from one place to another through choice.
Yeah.
I think a risk we have, and I'd be fascinated on your views, is we did it last week, the week before. We Googled around and went, how many sales and marketing roles are there in the UK in B2B? And it's fallen off a cliff this year by 100,000.
Wow.
And then if you look at how many open roles there are, Grant, there's about 105,000. So that would lead me, I know it's dirty research, but that would lead me to go, people don't want to be in sales anymore. So we've got to tackle as well, using your model, is how are salespeople bought into wanting to be in sales, and then how do we help them change to what's needed to be for the future? And so, Alex, I think there's a couple of pieces. Addictive leadership needs to be challenged, and actually, we need to get people comfortable that this is a role they want to do. Because if they're not comfortable doing it, they're kind of filling the seat and chasing the revenue. Then actually they're never going to change. They're just going to elect to go somewhere else anyway because they're doing it in the part-time. And yet, this is a wonderful career. It's a wonderful role.
Yeah.
It is when it works properly. You know, and I think that's one of the fundamental challenges, isn't it? And we've seen that with Jordan, who was a guest a few weeks ago on here. And his change in behavior transformed his relationship with his role in sales. You know, previously it was an abusive relationship. He would spend all of his time cold outreaching to people and they didn't want to have a conversation with him. So he was having one meeting a week with somebody that was reticent about having a conversation. Then he changed what he did and it was transformed from one meeting a week to 20 meetings a week. And all of a sudden he's loving his job because he's talking to a bunch of people every week that really want to talk to him. So he went from from literally hating to literally loving his job and looking forward to going to work each day. And I think that it is a wonderful career, but only if people are seeing the upside of it. And I think that there was an interesting comment from Martin here. If you understand, you do not need to learn. Therefore, but that's simultaneously right and exactly wrong, isn't it? Because if you're up for the change, you don't need this, because you're up for the change. It's like, okay, Grant, here's where we're going, and you go, fantastic, I can't wait to do. Well, actually, you don't need coaching, because you're going to be part of the impetus to drive the change through the organization, because you're keen to do it, because it meets with your personal objectives, your belief system, and all of those things. The challenge is everybody who doesn't feel that way, people who are scared, people who are reticent, people who are anti that change.
I would agree with that to a point, Adam. You're absolutely right. You can have change adopters, people that are championing the change and that they agree with it. So if I go through Scared So What, they've made a favorable decision. They're on board. So they've looked at their feelings, the side of that, and they say, yes, I'm on board. I'm championing change. But you still have a so what? And that's where we often miss within leadership and miss in organizations. And if you use organizational change management models, there is no so what. So I would say for the people who do champion it, all right, so what is your plan? And this is where business strategy coming in to build a so what plan is so critical. What is your strategy? What are your options? What's your way forward? Do you have hope or know how? What actions will you take? And how do you ensure you take ownership? So it's great if I'm championing change, but I still need to have a well thought out critical reflection session to say, what is my plan of action to carry this through for me personally? Because if I'm for the change and Andy's my boss and Andy's wonderful, and I do love Andy, really, not just for the show, but
150 million people on LinkedIn, and one of them loves him, so that's good.
There you go. There, just one. Well, it's got to be there. He paid me. But if Andy's my supervisor, so if Andy's my supervisor and I'm on board the change, but I don't know how I'm going to do it, then I go back into a danger zone of, well, Andy's going to tell me how to do it. And now I'm back in transactional leadership. And that's not where you want to be. You want to be able to have critical thought for yourself, take ownership. To Alex's point, that's what coaching does. And Scared So What is that personal coach to say, how am I going to do this? And then once I have my so what plan, I can share that with Andy and say, this is what I'm thinking. Are we aligned? Andy in tune can come back as a transformational coaching leader and say, right, that looks great. What will you do? How will you do that? Can you do that? Empowering me. You see the difference there? That piece is missing in typical leadership today.
So I've whilst we've all been talking, I've been looking at each of our LinkedIn profiles, and I've been seeing how many people are viewing this, and there's a lot of people watching today. Clearly, you're a bit of a rock star, Grant. So the loads of people have tuned in.
I think it's your TV.
But my point is, some of those people are going to be sales leaders. They're going to have a team, and the team will have to implement some change. You know, our conversations with every single organization that we have spoken to in the last 18 months has said pipeline is a big issue. So these organizations and the leaders that are on this stream will be thinking to themselves, how can I take my valuable individuals in my team on the journey that they're going to need to go on? Some of them will be implementing social selling. Some of them will be implementing other sales methodologies, or reconfiguring the team, or deciding on a different go-to-market, or whatever their strategy is. Be that strategy right or wrong, there will be a change process that those people will have to go through. So what can they do when they end this stream and they go out on a Tuesday morning into their organization? What can they start to do differently, which is likely to increase their chances of taking people on the journey rather than alienating those valuable people in the organization?
Yeah. Well, actually, what I would say to them is there is a tool that they can actually take and apply today. Absolutely today. As soon as we hang up this call, they can do it and start it. But I would encourage each and every one of you listening to this show today, if you are a leader in sales, as Andy says, you have got to learn how to be transformational and lead in a way that employs coaching, development, and fosters an open relationship that expresses vulnerability. That's okay. Throw away the old school machoism of I can't show my feelings. It doesn't work anymore. It's gone. We're not in 1980. We don't live in the consultative sales techniques, tips and trips to overcome objections and close sales. We live in a democracy, and people don't want you to close them. That's just not where we live. And employees don't want to be told what to do. So therefore, you need to get on board with the employees of today, or you might need to find another career. But there is a true tool that can help you do that. And it is called Scared So What. It is in the book, but you can actually download the app. So it's available on the Apple Store or Android, Scared So What. And it is the first tool to manage personal change in the palm of your hand. So when you download that app, you will learn what is personal change. And you as a leader need to do this yourself. You need to learn how to lead and how to coach towards this. But as Alex said, you can take a quiz anytime, day or night, wherever you are, and it will show you visually your results of how you're feeling. And when you click on each one of those results, it actually deep dives in and tells you exactly what your scores mean. From there, you can make your own so what plan, which is what you really want people to be doing. Embrace their feelings, stop assumption, make an informed decision, and then make a plan. So digitally, they can build their own so what plan. What's their strategy, options, way forward, hope, actions, and how they're going to take ownership. And you as a leader can see that, and you can start to foster coaching conversations with your team members. So it doesn't matter what change process is happening, what sales pipeline or problem or situation you're having. If you're not leading as a transformational leader, embracing vulnerability, coaching, and empathy and care, then you're going to get left behind. So take this new model, download it. It's free for individuals to use. If you want it in your organization, talk to me. We'll get it in your organization. I'm starting to give it into universities as well. So we want the world to be able to take this and learn it so that we can have a new generation. As Andy said, if you've got 100,000 people losing jobs, but you have 100,000 jobs available, there's a communication problem and there's a translation problem. Sales is a wonderful career pipeline. But again, too many of my fellow brethren my age and up are of the opinion that I have to tell you what to do. Those days are gone. You need to embrace change.
They are gone. But and I completely agree with everything you said. I do think, though, that there will be lots of sales leaders out there that come from that macho world of sales. You know, sales is about closing. I'm very prescriptive. I'm going to tell you what to do. You, Grant, are going to go and close that piece of business because we need that piece of business. And there are lots of sales leaders that operate in that way. And for you to say to them, not you, I mean, for one to say to them, you need to embrace your feelings. You need to be, it's like you might as well be speaking to them in Latin. So, but from having looked at the app and the methodology, even if they personally do not buy into the fact that they have to be all touchy-feely and gentle with their employees and their team, they can still use this as an empowerment technique to encourage their team to be more likely to come on the journey with them, can't they?
Absolutely. And you know, we had a conversation yesterday. Whatever is done inside the app is confidential. People's journey is personal. It is theirs, and you have to respect that boundary. But you can also encourage them to think and critically think and reflect on change that's happening, and how can they learn to develop and grow for themselves. So as a leader, as a sales leader, yes, you've got to be transactional, and there are times and moments where you have to be, but that can't be your full encapsulating leadership style. It needs to be flexible. It needs to be vulnerable. It has to have some agility so that you can support today's modern salesperson. And in doing so, you don't have to step outside of your comfort zone. It's interesting, when we did the research on Scared So What across Europe, Middle East, and Africa, all around the world, realistically, we asked people in a surveys, we said, how many of you, what percentage of you would use the scared versus what percentage of you would use the so what only? And it was right down the middle. 50% of them said, I really am interested in focusing on my feelings and learning how to manage change that way. And the other half said, I don't care about feelings. I want to get on with it. I want to build my own plan and learn how to do that. So there's individualistic styles of leadership, which is perfect. But then we asked them, we said, how many of you, what percentage believe that both should be used? And it was 96% said that both should be utilized. because you need to be able to understand how you feel inside and what decisions you can make, and then also be able to articulate that into a plan that works for yourself. So there has to be flexibility in the model use. There has to be flexibility in your leadership style, how willing you are to express your own vulnerability and help people to grow and help people to develop.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. I mean, I like the word emotion because, you know, as a sales academic like you, there's a lot of things now that are starting to lead toward, if we're not emotionally aware, how do we connect with customers who buy on emotion? And how are we connecting with those guys? And I think there's some really cool stuff on the back of what Grant talks about in terms of really the evolution of how we connect with people better and how we grapple with some of the big things that are coming down the line, because we're all in a flat spin about AI. AI is going to change the world for sales. It's like, well, none of the technologies that have gone before this have changed the conversion rates and changed the close rates. We will still be at about 52%, unless we actually follow some of the things you're talking about, Grant, which is actually becoming more human and understanding the emotions and even understanding the biases that are now in sales, which is consumerism. We're all consumers. You know, I would love to do some work with you about some of the buyers within rural Caribbean and actually see about them, because I don't think that they can change their consumer bias when they walk in and start procuring things on behalf of your company. And yet sellers probably don't know that.
And I love that. And that we actually, and as you know, you are a part of it. Back when I was in the master's program with Dr. Philip Squire's work on the sales mindsets and the positive mindsets in psychology and the way people want to be sold to, we actually, I challenged it. I challenged all of that learning as well. And my supervisor said, let's hire an outside consultancy to actually go interview our customers. What a shocker. How do you put up money and funding to go blindly interview your B2B customers? And we did that. We invited 160 Europe, Middle East, and Africa travel agents to participate in an external survey to find out how they liked our sales approach. And did it match with Dr. Squire's research, global research, that less than 10% of salespeople are effective at their jobs? I just thought there's just no way that's possible. Well, surprise, their unbiased on video camera interviews said that less than 10% of salespeople are effective at their jobs, even in our ways, which is why we worked with Andy and Consalia to build out, well, what is the way we should be selling in today's democracy, in the positive mindsets that customers want to be sold to. And I want to touch on a comment over here as well too. Mike Stoner, thank you so very much for this comment. And maybe I'm reading this or interpreting it wrong, but very Western individual advice. I love that. As you can probably hear in my accent, I am from America, born and raised in Kansas, but I left at about 16. I've been traveling the world ever since in the cruise industry. All of this research was done here in Europe. None of it was done in America. It was out of Middlesex University and Consalia Sales Business School here in London. And all of the research applicants and approach was shared across Europe, Middle East, Africa, Asia, Australia, Latin Caribbean. And we actually touched on America very last. So it's been about 5 years of global research applying this methodology. So it truly is global and it applies across multiple countries and generations. People haven't been taught how to manage change for themselves. So if we can learn this today and we can start to lead vulnerably and transformationally, we have a greater propensity for change success. But thank you. I really appreciate the comment. Anybody else?
Is it worth going down to Kieran's comment and working up, because a bunch of people have asked questions of you, Grant?
Yeah.
Well, and it would be really worthwhile. I thought it'd be worthwhile working through those. And
yeah, if you can help me, I can't see all of them. Kieran, I find the misunderstanding often happens around the definition of these concepts towards a different state where change starts from the current state. Yeah, absolutely, I would agree. They are very different concepts. You look at change, a change process, changed within an organization typically is thought out, is planned, is get everybody on board. We're going to do this on this date, on this time, and we're going to start. Here's our communication plan. Here's our process plan. Everything's going to be perfect. And there is absolutely zero room for Well, what happens if people reject? Because we don't ask those questions at all. And I love that. Often in discussions, I say to people, especially as leaders, when was the last time you implemented a change at work and you said to your employees, hey, Tim, do you agree with this change? Alex, do you support this change? Hey, Adam, are you on board with this change? And Andy, will you help me to execute this change? I'm a leader, and I'm making fun of the situation, but we never ask those types of questions in organized change management at work. We just don't do that. We don't ask those questions. We lead in a typical transactional approach, and we say, right, this is what we're going to do. I expect everybody to follow. But to achieve transformation, to Karen's point, transformation has to have a different approach. And it has to say, right, how do we go from where we are today to a whole new approach and a new different venue? And we are not going back. We don't go back to where we were. That's the key definition to transform.
Can I just say though, Grant, I having been a leader in organizations where I've driven change across the sales team, I thought I was a transformational leader. But now, having spent some time with you, read the book, having these conversations, I don't think I was, because I wasn't asking those types of questions to the individual, really understanding them. I was still dragging them along on the change. I think it's an important point, right? Because many leaders must feel the same way as I do. Oh, I'm a transformational leader without fully understanding it.
Well, and that's okay for you to learn. If you have the open desire / intention to support, and the key word is, are you doing the effect? Are you achieving the effects of the transformation that you're supposed to achieve? Can you do that? But the key difference is normally if you don't bring the individuals along on the journey, then you won't transform, because you're not going to know how the people are feeling. You're not asking those difficult questions. And think back to yourselves. This goes back to Andy's approach on sales. Isn't it interesting that we as individuals, we all experience being sold to, right? So if you go to a store, you go to a car dealer, you go to buy a house or whatever, and the salesperson's approach is hard, pushy, over arrogant, driving on you, the first thing you do is wait. You put your hands up, you're like backing out, you don't want to be sold to, you might even leave, or you hang up the phone, right? This is a hard poised sales approach. We don't want that. So then why would we teach that? Why would we expect that within our own organizations?
Yeah.
The same thing applies towards change management and change leadership. If you yourself don't know how you are expected to carry out that change process, then you're not going to be successful unless you invite the people that are involved in the change and expected to carry out the change.
Yeah. To Mark's point, Adam, if you put up Mark's point, I think I've experienced leaders who have inspired me to change, but not everyone feels that sense of action having been inspired.
Yeah.
So, Mark, I think, I understand what you're saying, but I do think what we're talking about here is very different, and it needs to come from the individual.
I think the other thing is that it's very easy to, you're at the front, you're leading. Come along, chaps, we're going into battle. And you assume everybody's behind you. And even if they are following you, you assume their heart's in it.
Assume. Keywords assume.
Assume. Yeah, exactly.
How many times do you see that great leader? Come on, gents, we're going. And the team are actually going, oh God, here we go again. He's motivated.
But even the caring leader, that says, no, are you with me? Come on, and there's still a lot of people left behind then. Or people say, just politely saying, yes, okay, I'm with you, when they're not really.
I think that's the key point, isn't it? So unpacking that and saying, come on, Alex, you and I sit down, we'll have a conversation. You can tell me what you're scared of, because this is a scary process, and really try to draw that out of you. Now, obviously, we've now got an app for that, but that conversation bit, checking in with each of those individuals and really unpacking their feelings around this, is something which has been completely ignored, because what this is, have you affirmed that you're up for this? Yes, I have. And the reason I have is because the 20 other people in the team have affirmed it, and I'm not going to be the one that says, well, actually, I'm not sure of this. Now, the irony is that maybe 19 of the other 20 people in the team are all in exactly the same space that I'm in, where they're saying it because they think that's the expectation of everybody else.
There's also another big, sorry, Andy, there's a big assumption, and I want to acknowledge Ahmed. He's got a key word here called, what about resistance to change? And there, I hear so many times, well, people are resistant to change. People are just resistant. That's just the way they are. And that's simply not true. If I go back to what we said earlier, how many of you have been taught how to manage personal change? None of you could say yes. And I get that every single time. So it's not that we're resistant and people are constantly resistant. We don't know how to manage it. So when you get through the scared process, the R is receptive or rejective. So as a leader, if somebody is rejecting the change, if they take the scared quiz on the app and you can see that actions is red and explore is red, which are the action items to generate information, more often than not, it's because they didn't take the time to generate information. They went straight to assumption. And so it's not that they've rejected, they've assumed, and they haven't taught themselves how to break it down and critically reflect the change process. When you do that, when you bring in information, then all of a sudden you can start to make an informed decision. And that's a different outcome and a different output. And when you make an informed decision, you know, if you still are rejecting the change as a leader, all right, well, so what can you do? So what's your plan? If you're flat out rejecting this change, that's okay. Human beings don't have to accept every single change that's given to them. But my role as a transformational leader is, if you're not on board with the team, where can I place you? Where do you need to go? Because this is the direction. But now you're being inclusive of the individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think there's a really interesting to close out on. All of this massively disappoints me. Not what you're doing, but because we've just opened this massive can of worms. And I talk to leaders around the world, and it fundamentally comes down to, we do not give salespeople individual choice.
Mm-hmm.
We never do it. We're petrified of it. There has been some research, I don't know if you've uncovered them, Artis and Harris, 2007, found out that salespeople were theoretically and researched the best people on the planet to direct their own learning capability. We just don't give them that. We just tell them it. Because if I have got 200 salespeople, the last thing I want is to give 200 people the opportunity to do 200 different things. It petrifies me. So what I'll do is I'll force them into one particular area, and I'll force them into the box, and they will then have done it. And then how can you possibly ask them to do individualistic change, transformation, if we actually at the core level don't even treat them as individuals and give them this thing called choice? Because adults respond firstly, absolutely brilliantly, to choice. And we don't do it. And so we've got to start really thinking about this in a massively different way and say, you know what, it's okay. Because actually, if you found a salesperson doing the app at their desk, a lot of leaders would go, no, don't worry about that. I need you to just do the forecast. I just need you to get your numbers done for me. Which then the leadership style immediately says, I don't care about you as an individual, and I don't care about your change. Hang on a minute. You wouldn't. That's wrong. If you don't care for your people, what is it? Colin Powell said two great things. Yeah, look after your people. You've been in the military. They will get the job done. And I think the leadership quote from Colin Powell that I love that his sergeant told him once was, you know you're a great leader when people follow you, even if it's only out of curiosity.
Yeah.
I think he also said, we don't know what we don't know, and we know what we don't know. And he said that quote. So, yeah. Anyway, we're at time. Everyone on the panel, thank you so much. Dr. Grant, thank you so much. And I hope that you will come back and join us again to pick up this conversation and continue this, because this is fascinating stuff. To everyone in the audience, Ahmed, Mark, Mike, Ian, Martin, Alex, other Mark, Kieran, Michael, Adil. Thank you all so much for your questions and comments. Absolutely fantastic. For those of you who are in UK or west of here time, we will be coming back on for our first ever SalesTV in America later today. So I hope you can join us for that. And everyone in America, I hope you can join us for that as well. In the meantime, and until next week, thank you all very much indeed, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Thanks,
all.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.